Yet now, if the Rohirrim are grown in some ways more like to us, enhanced in arts and gentleness, we too have become more like to them, and can scarce claim any longer the title High. We are become middlemen of the Twilight, but with memory of other things. Tolkien's legendarium achieves its depth through its history and mythology being shared by those figures inhabiting Arda itself, truth mingled with legend. When we discuss that world, we commonly say that the First Age began with the rising of the sun, when it really began with the awakening of the elves before the sun or moon even existed. Yet, when the moon arose for the first time, followed by the sun, it was the First Age of men, the dawn of mankind, the beginning of the history of the Second Born. In my video detailing the history of the greatest men of the First Age, the Men of Light, I speak of the connection between elves, the firstborn, and men, the secondborn. The dawn of a new age for each kindred began with their own awakening. The sundering of their people through a great journey gave rise to many distinctive groups and categories, and with men, the most notable and famous were those men who passed west over the Blue Mountains and fought with the elves against the tyrant Morgoth, later being offered as a reward the island of Elena in the Great Sea, and with the enemies of the Men of Light being known as the Men of Darkness, servants of Morgoth who would later follow his lieutenant Sauron. It seems easy to group the entire race of men into houses of great heroes and elf friends set against villains and evil wicked men. But who and what are the Men of Twilight, the middlemen? In this video I'm going to explore the men who did not rise as high as the Edain who became the Númenóreans, nor did they fall as low as the wild men who worshipped and served tyrants. I'm speaking of those men who in the Third Age we know as the Northmen of Rhovanion, and later the Rohirrim, the men of Bree, Dale and Laketown, though the use of the term middlemen is debated and even misused and abused in Middle-earth. It is a part of my series exploring what I see as the three main branches of men descended from the first men, a series that will hopefully answer questions such as who chose to fight against Morgoth in the First Age, which men founded the Kingdom of Númenor, did any men refuse that gift, were all men who didn't fight against Morgoth alongside the elves evil? When the Men of Númenor sailed to Middle-earth once again, who were the men who were already there? These questions and others will be answered through an exploration of these branches. Men of Light, the Edain, Men of Twilight, the Middlemen, Men of Darkness, the Wild Men. I opened this video with a quote from Faramir, son of the steward Denethor during the Third Age, speaking of differences between Men of Gondor and Men of Rohan. The former once been seen as greater or higher than the latter due to their heritage and lineage, that kingdom being founded by Men of Númenor after its fall, and the kingdom of Rohan being a much younger kingdom founded by men who had never sailed across the sea. This gap between high men and lesser men being shortened over the years. His words speak of the Men of Rohan rising to meet them, but it is coupled with their own decline. Faramir believes that men of his own realm can no longer so openly claim to be high men, so closely linked in nobility to those men who sailed east of a fallen Númenor and founded the realms in exile. They are middlemen. Who thought of this term and what does it mean? Tolkien tells us that the term middlemen is of ancient origin, ancient in relation to Faramir and his people being of the Third Age. Thousands of years earlier in the Second Age of Middle-earth, the Númenóreans first used this term, a term for those who were friendly towards elves and men of the West, or who shared some ancestry with the High Men of Númenor, but who were not so high, and a way to distinguish them from the Men of Darkness, the low men who had turned to and served evil since the dark age of man's early existence in the east of the world. It is perhaps easiest to think of the middlemen as being made of other distinct groups in their own right, instead of being a name for one group of men. The first, those men who had fled the terror of Morgoth in the east, refusing to worship him and becoming what men of the West would call Men of Darkness. Men who journeyed west but who did not cross the Blue Mountains, escaping the yoke of the Dark Lord but not joining the elves of Beleriand in wars against him in the west, thus not growing in stature to become elf friends of the houses of Beor, Harith or Hador, nor being offered the Island of Gift, elevating them still to become Númenóreans, blessed by the lords of the West. In fact, around 600 years into the existence of Númenor, enough time for the Men of the Isle to grow even greater than they had already grown through their rise in the First Age of Middle-earth, the Men of Númenor sailed back across the sea. During the reign of Tar Elendil, a ship came out of the west to Middle-earth, passing up the Gulf of Lune. Welcomed by Gil-galad, a friendship and alliance was made with the Elves of Lindon and the Númenóreans. Yet men dwelling in Eriador heard of this news. Men who did not view elves as equals, but held them in reverence and looked upon them in awe, their betters. They heard of the arrival of men from a place they believed was beyond the western mountains they had never passed, a land ruined by tumults of fire and inrushing seas. These men of Middle-earth asked to meet the men who had returned from death in the deeps of the sea. At the Tower Hills, 12 of the curious men of Eriador represented their folk and bravely met with legends from across the sea, not fearing them as perilous spirits of the dead. They looked upon them without fear, but stood silent in awe. These 12 men were seen as mighty among their own people, but stood before tall men resembling elvish lords in bearing and apparel, but they were mortal. It was striking for the men of Númenor too, for they believed that men who had been left behind were evil, those men whom Morgoth had summoned from the east in the last days of the wars in Beleriand. They stood before men who, it is said, could have walked in Númenor and not been thought aliens save in their clothes and their arms. It is then said that as they began to recognise shared words and became mingled in friendship, it became apparent that these men of Middle-earth were of the same stock as the peoples of Beor and Hador, but those who had not crossed into Beleriand in the First Age, becoming sundered from those who had. Those men who would become the House of Beor and the House of Hador in the First Age had dwelt in the northeast of the Sea of Rhûn for a time, but when groups left to continue west, some did not go with them, but found themselves in Eriador, that realm between Lindon and the Blue Mountains. Others found themselves in Rhovanion, east of the Misty Mountains, and containing Greenwood the Great. The middlemen also consisted of another group, those men who had already refused the call of Morgoth to serve him, but who also refused the gift and summons of the Valar. Some of these men went east again, and were led by those who had served Morgoth, falling into darkness through being physically removed from the Edain who did sail west, and by the elves who had befriended them. Another group that never seems to be discussed are those of the Edain who were willing to sail across the sea, but missed their chance. The history of the Akalabith tells us that the elf Círdan was heavily involved in the migration of men from Middle-earth to Elena. Elvish boats were used to migrate men for at least 50 years. Some say that 150 vessels were used and others say up to 200 or 300. This process ended when Círdan was instructed by the Valar to provide no more ships or guides. It may be speculation, but I would think that if he was told to stop, then it meant that there were more who would have made that journey. But the same passage also says, in more detailed histories it is related, as might be deduced from the events and the numbers concerned, that after the first expedition led by Elros, many other ships, alone or in small fleets, came west bearing others of the Edain, either those who were at first reluctant to dare the great sea, but could not endure to be parted from those who had gone, or some who were far scattered and could not be assembled to go with the first sailing. And we can't forget the middlemen who may have been descendants of men who fled Beleriand. The land beyond the mountains was destroyed, the sea was feared, fugitives from the Etani who fled east instead of sailing west, as much a part of the Edain as those who fought alongside elves in the First Age, becoming mingled with other men of Middle-earth who never crossed into Beleriand. This last group becomes very important when talking about the history of Rohan's own ancestors in the Third Age. The men of the First Age being great, of course, but wouldn't ancestors who descended from the heroic Edain be even greater than those who were never counted among the elf friends? And the last group is the result of Númenóreans settling once again in Middle-earth. As they settled havens and communities on the western shores of Middle-earth, the term Middle Men came into use as explained earlier. However, these men of the north later became strengthened by actual Númenóreans during the reign of Ar-Adunachor. This king was the first to refuse a royal title in the Quenya language, a sign of things to come. The Quenya name, Tar Harinumin, was replaced by Ar-Adunachor, Lord of the West, a powerful yet blasphemous name that really referred to the king of Arda, Manwë. Tolkien tells us that in this time, over 2,000 years since Númenóreans had sailed east again, many of those who were faithful to the elves and to the Valar fled. They refused to join in any rebellion against the Valar, but did not remain on the isle itself like the most famous of the faithful who were saved from the great catastrophe that brought the end to the kingdom. This group joined Men of Middle-earth and stayed true, high men who mingled with middle men before the Second Age came to a close. The group we call middlemen was therefore made up of several other groups, and some of them may just be rumour. The Númenóreans created this term to distinguish themselves from men who were seen as not being as great as them, but free from the tyranny of Morgoth. It is another similarity shared between elves and men, as men also classified the elves with similar names. High Elves, Elves of Light, the Noldor who returned out of the far west. Middle Elves, Elves of Twilight, near kin to High Elves but who never witnessed the light of Aman. Dark Elves, those elves who not only didn't journey west, but who also had no desire to see Aman. Tolkien says that elves did not distinguish themselves in this exact way, except for the use of elves of darkness or dark elves, referring to an ignorance of the light of Aman. It did not in any way imply evil or subordination to Morgoth, unlike man's use of men of darkness. Still, even the use of the term middlemen and Middle-earth became confused in its application. Intended to be used for those men who were friendly towards the west, or Men of Númenor and elves, it became applied to men whose stature and looks were seen as being similar to the men of the west themselves, and this confused application continued beyond the existence of the Kingdom of Númenor, a way to maintain the superiority and noble heritage of a fallen kingdom. A term once used to distinguish friend from foe became a reason to take advantage of men in Middle-earth, to enslave and oppress lesser men instead of befriending them, and to later rebel in Gondor, leading to the kin strife and diminishment of once great men in Middle-earth. A reason to set so-called high men apart from those who never received that great gift from the Valar, one way or another.